you get a lot of different perspectives. And I think the more perspectives you have, or the more things that you can go back to or fall back to in situations, like now you know maybe how to handle things differently. And so I just think that was really important with this group, and something that's really important as a coach in general. The more tools that I can have in my toolbox to better help my kids, that's what it's all about.
If you don't have it like internalized to a certain degree that you can competently deliver it, it's not going to work. And then who's going to be upset? You know, your staff. And so the idea of putting your spin on it, that's really what we're talking about. It's that long wind of knowing who you are and being in touch with that.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Clearing the Bases, the podcast where we step up to the plate and dive deep into the world of youth baseball. I'm your host, Jimmy Filangieri. You know, on this show, we discuss all things related to the preparation and development of youth baseball players, coaches, and yes, even parents. So sit back, settle in, and get ready to hear from some of the greatest baseball minds out there.
At times, being a head coach can kind of be lonely. And I say that, but I have great assistant coaches. I have great people that I can talk to. But just having those support groups is so huge. Being able to just call up Cam, Jimmy, Jeremy, whoever, and just be, hey, this is what I'm going through. Like, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking? What do you like? It carries so much weight, because then once you start talking, it's like, oh, he knows the exact same thing that I'm going through. Like, he's dealt with the exact same thing.
Well, you know, back in September 15th to be exact, I started going to a coaching group with Jeremy Sheetinger, and he called it the Diamond Coaches Development Group. And it was a bunch of guys, a bunch of coaches. We got together and we were there to learn from Sheetinger, who was hosting the coaches clinic, we'll call it. And I got to meet some really, really good guys, and I'm really happy that I did it. So we decided that what better thing to do to get through to youth baseball coaches and all of you coaches out there than bringing these guys on, talking, and we're going to go through a series of shows. There'll be 3 of them, and we'll get to know the coaches. We'll get to know what they're thinking, and believe me, you're going to learn a lot. But before we get to learning from these 3 amazing coaches, let's learn something about the 6-Tool app.
For baseball coaches like you, every game brings measurable progress. However, game time isn't the time for trial and error learning. Instead, have a proactive approach. Use 6-Tool, the best baseball player development tool on the market. We provide a platform to level up your coaching strategy by helping you to quickly identify and address your players' knowledge of the game. By using our easy-to-implement interactive player quizzes, you can assess position-specific issues, overall baseball IQ, and much more. Win more games and develop better overall baseball players with effective off-the-field training. Visit us at 6-tool.com. 6-Tool. Get ahead in the game.
Tonight, we have 3 coaches on. We have Jeremy J.T. Tayson, and he's from Justin Siena High School in Napa, California. We have Cameron Cam Koplitz, and Cam is on the IR right now, but believe me, he's a good coach. All right? And then we have Sammy Marks from Farmington High School in Farmington, Utah. You know, the one thing, guys, I want to know is Jeremy, JT, Cameron, Cam, Sam, Sammy. Everybody's got like this nickname. I don't have a nickname. How'd that come about?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, what, did somebody just start calling you, JT, and it just came out of the blue? Was it somebody in particular, Cam, Sam?
My mom just called it for me for short, and it kind of stuck with some of my friends growing up. And then as I got older, it became Cameron when my mom was mad at me. So that's when I knew things were bad for me.
A lot of people, JT, that's an easy one, right? and my last name being Tayson. A lot of people actually call me Jason. My high school coach called me Jason for a long time. Never knew my name, probably because I couldn't hit that well. So that was always kind of what it landed on, was JT.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Just kind of like a childhood thing. Parents start calling you Sammy, and then teachers that know your mom, they start calling you Sammy, and then the coaches, and it just becomes a thing, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I could think of a few nicknames that people probably call me, but we don't want to use those on the air. So, but anyway, so guys, do me a favor. Give me a little bit of your background. How'd you get into coaching? You know, what it's like coaching where you are. Sam, let's start with you.
Yeah. So as you said, I'm from Farmington, Utah. I'm at Farmington High School. I played it late in high school, then got straight into coaching there. I coached there for about 4 or 5 years under Coach Furneaux. Incredible guy. And then took a teaching job down like in southernish Utah, kind of like middle part of Utah. And ended up coaching at Bingham High School under Coach Sato for a year, which was super cool. And then ended up getting a high school teaching job up here in Farmington. So kind of ended up moving back up north, back closer to family. And I currently teach health and history at the high school, and this will be going into my second year as the head coach. It's a fairly new school. We're about, I think, 5 or 6 years old, so not a whole lot of like history into the school yet. But I'll tell you what, like the kids are amazing. It is a special place for sure. Administration's great. I mean, it's just a special place, and couldn't be happier.
That's fantastic. A new program. I mean, new school, new program. That's great. Okay, Jeremy, you're up next.
Yeah, so I coach here at Justin Siena High School here in Napa. It's my 9th year as the head coach, 12th overall. Played high school baseball at Sonoma Valley High School. It's the next town over here. I actually got into coaching baseball. We love baseball, right? Everyone on this call, we love this game. So it was always something that I knew I wanted to be around. But after my senior year, I was playing ball with my buddies out at the local park, and the JV coach saw me, and I was dressed like I was, going to play ball, socks up, ready to go. The guy had no clue who I was, but saw that I was, in his words, dressed right, needed some help, knew that I had just graduated, and asked me, hey, do you want to coach JV ball? That was 21 years ago. Been here ever since. So that's Fred Fagan, huge mentor impact on me for sure. But here at great school, we do a lot of really good things in terms of making this education accessible to a lot of people. It's a private school. The kids we have here, they're so nice. They're so good. They're engaged. It's just a really, really positive environment, and we're really lucky to have the kids that we do. And it's a really competitive baseball area too. I don't think a lot of people realize how many good players come out of our league, out of this area overall. So just like we were talking about before we got on the call, the weather's nice, but the baseball is nice around here too, for sure.
Well, I hate you for the weather being nice. So talk to us, Cam.
So I went to Oshkosh West High School, played 4 years of baseball there, and then went on and played 4 years of college baseball down at the University of Dubuque. And so when I got done, baseball was something that I just didn't want to give up. And so I came back home, kind of helped out with some coaching a little bit back home in Oshkosh, did some stuff down in Dubuque, and then came back home kind of permanently and got into it and started working my way up through literally all levels of high school baseball. So I've done freshman, JV. I spent 7 years as the head varsity coach at Slinger High School. And then, like you said, I'm on the IR right now for the year. We just moved up to the Green Bay area, so trying to get things settled in for like our family and whatnot. And so just kind of seeing what the area is like. But, baseball in my mind has always been really, really good to me. And it was always a family thing for us. And so this was a way for me to give back because of all of the coaches that I've had sacrificed and served and did all that. This was a way for me to do it, kind of give back that way.
Well, it's a shame that you didn't go from Iowa to New York, because I tell you right now, I'd have put you on my coaching staff right away. I'd cut my left arm off for a coach like you.
Appreciate it.
So guys, tell me, this whole thing with Sheets Diamond Coaches Group, how did you guys, sign up for this? How'd you get involved?
So I'm kind of in a unique ish spot. So this is like the second group that I've done. And so I was in a group somewhat similar to this last spring. And so, as I mentioned before, like I coached at Bingham High School and under the legendary Coach Sato, and he kind of opened me up to the Diamond Summit down in Lawrenceville. So I ended up going down there in the fall, and it was absolutely incredible. One of like the best events I think I've ever been to. And then in the winter time, springish time, Sheets kind of sent out an email, like a mass email to a lot of guys that attended that event and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing something like this. And, how many of you guys would be interested? And right away, like I was like, I've got to jump on it. And so kind of was involved in that. One of like the coolest things ever, just like such an incredible experience to be around just a bunch of like-minded coaches that are trying to make each other better. And so then when Sheets mentioned that, he's going to do another one this fall, I was like, I got to jump on it again. Like this is like such an incredible opportunity to just kind of branch out and meet new people. And never would I've ever thought that I'd be like talking to people from California, Wisconsin, New York. But it is like, it's the coolest thing ever. And there's like so many incredible people out there. So.
Yeah, isn't that the best part of this too, is how much in common we have really across the board too. I got involved right around the time Sheets was, making his name in the ABCA space, was right when I got hired as the head coach. So, you're eager to learn and to do things the right way. And so I've kind of been following Sheets, and we're both named Jeremy, right? So it's like a shared kinship there. So all the way through that evolution in his career has been right around the same time that been doing what I've been doing over here. So once he put that out, it just felt like the right time. Like we've all been talking about, like the coaching education is so important, and that it was time for myself to get my butt in the seat and share some information with some guys on a real intimate level, rather, the barnstormers and the national conventions and the coaches insider videos. That stuff's awesome, right? But the way that we're engaging with each other in this relationship driven format, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, for me, like I followed Sheets for a while with all of his podcasting and things that he's done. So he's always been someone that like you listen to a lot. And so when I saw him put this out on social media and like you said, in kind of that September timeframe, I knew that I was taking the year off and decided that this was going to be something that I felt was going to really help me moving forward and meet a group of guys that love the game of baseball. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. And I think once we got into it, it solidified that for me with the guys that we have in that group to be able to talk life, baseball, job, whatever it may be. That was what sold me with the group.
Yeah, I know with me it was, I saw he had posted something on social media. So, I texted him right away and I said, hey, what's this all about? And he explained it to me. So I said, all right, yeah. I said, this sounds great. I'll be there. I said, and it's funny with Sheets because like you guys had said, from following him through social media and then getting to know him by having him on the show and, with him having the ABCA podcast, he's been a mentor to me in so many ways in both baseball and, believe it or not, with the podcast. Because there are so many times that on this show, like I'll want to do something, whether it be an intro or an exit, and I'll always say, well, how does Sheets do it? And I'll go back and I'll listen to an episode that he did and kind of pick off of what he did and, make it my own one way or another. But yeah, he's truly an amazing guy. And by doing what he does with stuff like this, to be able to teach guys like us how to become better coaches, it's just, he's an amazing guy.
And I think for me, the biggest thing that I was interested in is the stuff outside of baseball, right? Like, I think that for me was just really, really enticing. The leadership stuff, the personal stuff, the emotional stuff, all of that, the emotional learning and understanding ourselves. That part was the best part for me.
Yeah. And like, I love that you mentioned that too, because that's the stuff too that sticks with kids, right? Like, I mean, baseball ends for everybody, and at the end of the day, like we're trying to help kids. We're trying to help people grow. And what a better way to do that than learn from some of the best, right? Like you can really emphasize that, the social and emotional aspect and really help these kids learn not just how to navigate baseball, but navigate life, like it's huge. So being able to learn that from just a bunch of other like-minded people, it's not very common to find that for sure.
Yeah, I would add that it really makes a lot of sense for us to share what we shared with each other, and the idea that here we are spread across the country, and so many of our, I don't know, issues is an exaggerated word, but what we go through as a coach was so similar. And to tie it back to Sam's point, that's really what it's all about at the end of the day, right? So we're talking about all these different methods to improve ourselves, and in turn, like not in a cliche way, but to pay it forward into the players or the people that are around us. And hearing that, like what Cam has gone through in his coaching career and how that overlaps with your career, Jimmy, and mine and Sam's career. I mean, that's 4 time zones right there, basically, right? And it's all different, but it's all the same. And that was really reassuring, I guess, in many ways. And knowing that you have a group of guys that you could throw a text out to, or the phone calls that we shared, and it's like, oh, and you hear it a different way, and you're like, that's exactly what blank player on my team needs right now. And let's go get them. Let's make them better.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about it all the time, relationships. And without those relationships of like-minded people, okay, and that's important because, again, I feel that after knowing you guys now for 10 weeks, we are all like-minded. We all have the same goal. But when you build those relationships with like-minded people, that's what makes us better coaches. If you're going to be egotistical and think, I know everything and I don't need to talk to this guy and, I know better than he does, well, that's how I think people fall by the wayside. What do you guys think?
Oh, for sure. Like, I think one of my favorite videos that I show my kids each year is it's a video of Nick Saban inviting Kobe Bryant to come and speak to his team. And the front row is Nick Saban taking notes. Like, that is like the greatest college football coach of all time. And he is there learning. And so I love what you're saying about this idea of like, you've got to put your ego aside. Like, if you let your ego like taint what you're trying to do, it is a killer for sure. Like, you have to be so open and willing to learn and grow, because I mean, things are always changing, right? You adapt or die. And so when that goes for baseball, it goes for life. Like, if you could let that ego get in the way, it's pretty detrimental for sure. So I love what you said there, Jimmy. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's something that go ahead. I'm sorry. Who was that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I was going to say, and you think about, kind of the thing that you're passionate about, Jimmy, with coaching education. And if you're not throwing your hat in the ring to sharpen your tools a little bit, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And even if you are egotistically driven, hey, this is about wins and losses. If you're not getting yourself better, you're leaving some wins and losses on the table. You're leaving some peace of mind. You're turning those 12 pitch innings into 19 pitch innings, and that's making us old, man. So the idea that, people don't want to necessarily get in the ring, or do want to get in the ring with like-minded people, you're just giving yourself more ammo for the different stuff that gets tossed your way. And to not engage at some level, whether it's, as intensive as, the program we were in, or, just going to a clinic for a day, you're just leaving money on the table. And what does that really hurt at the end of the day? It's the athlete's experience and the way that you're going to, be perceived, or the way that they're going to look back on that career. It's a kind of a make or break deal,
Yeah, I think too, like, especially in like the group that we've had, you've got a wide variety of experiences and situations that have come up, right? And so I think sometimes in our own states of where we're at and where we're coaching, we have people that we go to, but to have other coaches around the country like we have in this group with the different amounts of experience in coaching that we've had with this group, like, you get a lot of different perspectives. And I think the more perspectives you have, or the more things that you can go back to or fall back to in situations, like, now maybe how to handle things differently. And so I just think that was really important with this group, and something that's really important as a coach in general. The more tools that I can have in my toolbox to better help my kids, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, the first episode ever with this podcast was called Coaching the Coaches. And we went over what it means to be a coach and to further educate and continue to educate, because like we all just said, the end goal is the kids. You know, we need to be better so that they can be better. It's that simple.
Yeah, and even Cam, you were talking about experience. I think often we think about it like, you know, the grizzled veteran, but even being in a group like with Sammy, right? It's second year as the head guy. It was also kind of a bit of accountability on my part, because when you get into your rhythm, when you've been somewhere for X amount of time, you're doing things your way, and to see someone that's, you know, starting it out, you know, on the right foot, you're kind of like, oh yeah, we used to kind of want to go down that road, but now we don't anymore. And it's a really good opportunity, like all continuing education, to kind of pause. And when you add different elements of experience and perspectives on there, it's just a good way to just be like, oh yeah, like that works. And I remember when I was, you know, that eager to do some of those things, and why haven't I done that, you know, or why didn't I follow through, or maybe I should add that back in. Just was really awesome to think about it from the younger perspective too, because there's a lot of value in that too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, let me ask you this then, because this is the way I find it. So like you said, Jeremy, if we go out and we learn something new, okay, and we're going to implement it, say, geez, I'm going to implement that, okay, it's not easy at first. It's just like anything else. Like if you're going to teach one of your players something new, he's not going to get it right away. It's going to take work. Well, as coaches, it's the same way. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
No, I just was going to say, like, for me, I'm a big note taker, right? So like I have to take notes. I have to see it, read it, give it a little bit, and then sort of come back to it, which for me is just sort of how I learn. But, you know, I think the biggest thing is we have to be prepared, and I have to be prepared as a coach to share ideas and share thoughts and new ways to do things for my kids to be successful. That learning piece and is so key to me.
Yeah, and I think part of when you're implementing something new, right, you go to the ABCA, you engage in a group like this, and it's like, oh, I want to do that tomorrow. We're going to do this tomorrow. But if you're not engaging in some form of reflection or education, you don't really know who you are, right? So you don't know where you're sailing. And it's really important that when you're implementing something new, you have to implement it relative to who you are, who you have, what your style is. Because if all of a sudden you come out with something way different, it's off brand, you know. And if it's not something like Cam was saying, if you don't have it like internalized to a certain degree that you can competently deliver it, it's not going to work. And then who's going to be upset? You know, your staff. And so the idea of putting your spin on it, that's really what we're talking about. It's that long wind of knowing who you are and being in touch with that.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I love hearing that, because especially like this past year two, trying to establish a program and trying to really like get that identity and those standards. And if you're which there is value in always trying to take in new information. But if it's just like a take, it's like one of those water hose or the fire hose situations, mm-hmm. where it's just like water is just completely blasting it and you can't retain any of it. And so being able to, I think, have that balance, like you're saying, of like taking in that information and then adapting it to what you need, taking what you like and implementing it to who you are is huge. I think that's what coaching is in general. So JT, I think you hit that right on the head, man. That was awesome.
Yeah, and I think another part of that too is it's okay to have like the fire hose pouring at you, but you just got to know when to drink. And you might not know when to give that cup of water to your player, you know, but if you're in the cage and all of a sudden they're doing XYZ thing that's a little off mechanically, mentally, whatever the situation may be, then it's there for you. And then you can use it. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think some of these, you know, tips and tricks, if you want to call them, you know, are at the ready. You don't need to go, you know, fire hose on everybody, but all of a sudden the right moment, you know, presents itself and you're like, oh, I know this, I can help this guy right here, right now. And then it works. And, you know, that's downhill from there. That's the sweet stuff.
I have to take that one. Give that cup of water to a kid. I like that.
I think for me, the biggest thing, like, especially with the ABCA and some of the clinics being in the winter in Wisconsin, we really can't work with our kids or practice doesn't start until the beginning of March. Like, that gives me a good 6 to 7 weeks to kind of, like you talked about, like, reflect on some of that stuff. Because you're right, when you get done with a clinic or you get done with the convention, man, you want to take that information and go, this is how we're going to do it now. It works for Tennessee, we're going to run it here. And to have that sort of downtime to be like, hey, I need to check myself a little bit and make sure that I have the information, the people, the ability to do these things. That part, I think, is always key, that reflection piece too. So,
but I also think that you need to be creative because, like you said, you have to make sure you have the manpower, the equipment, whatever, to implement what you want to implement. But I feel that maybe if you don't, you could be creative and make it yours. You can still use it, use the principle of it, but create it in your way. And I also believe that when we are taking something new, and I'll tell my boys right out, all right, guys, look, this is the first time I'm doing this, okay? We're going to take it in slow steps. It's going to look like a mess, okay? But if we keep doing it every so many days, eventually we're going to get it right, and it's going to become part of our regular routine.
That's awesome. I love what you said there about, the principle of it, right? The essence of it, and, teeing your team up for success by saying, hey, here's the how, and we're going to get to the why eventually with this. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's working as a team. We're working together. It's not, me, I'm big coach, we do what I say. It's like, no, come on, guys, let's get together. Let's make this work.
and I think sometimes too, when you're implementing something new, letting the kids know, like, hey, this is going to feel different. This is going to look different. And explaining the why, I think then they can go, oh, all right, now I understand why it's going to feel different, or how it fits into the next steps in the routine of a drill or what you're trying to do somewhere down the road. It's giving them your players the ability to say, hey, this may not be perfect, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think that it's an opportunity to create a little fun. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard me say this, but I like to say that when I coach, I don't take myself too seriously. There are times when I am, dead serious and, we got to get to it. But there's other times where I like to keep it light. And I like a situation like that where I could joke with the guys and say, okay, guys, do this, and then look at it and go, no, wait a minute, guys. Coach is a moron. Come on, do it this way. And the boys laugh a little, they take it light, and then we get to it. And I think it's a good opportunity to do that and show them that, we have faults too, that we're not perfect.
Yeah.
And, and that ties right back to that ego point, right? Like, if you have such a high ego that you can't admit when you're wrong, like, the kids are going to know when you're wrong. Like, you're going to mess up, right? Like, we all mess up. Yeah. So if you aren't big enough and man enough to go, you know what, hey guys, I messed up. Like, we're going to do something new, it might work, it might not work. Like, you're going to lose that trust. And if you lose that trust, like, you're kind of hosed. Like, that's a hard way back to gain that. So I love what you said there. Like, that ego point tying into it is crucial.
I feel like that's more important than ever, right? It feels like there's a lot more scrutiny on everything in the world. It's harder to get trust. It's harder to gain accountable moments from people. So as the model of what it should be to be a good, healthy man, to model that vulnerability, right? It's the common word for it, or authenticity, to say, like, yeah, hands up, I screwed this one up, or, hey guys, this is going to be a little funky. You have a little permission to fail here. You're modeling that for a group of kids, now more than ever, perhaps need someone to do that. We're so wired to protect our egos, especially in adolescence, that if we're not showing that to them, who is, right? We don't know that anyone else is doing that for them. They might be going back into a pretty soft landing somewhere else in their life. So modeling that for them is just so much more important than I ever thought it would be. But it's actually much more gratifying, I feel like, as a coach, to be able to do that for them or for the other coaches too. And so, like, yeah, like, we're not perfect here, and that's okay, because baseball ain't perfect, and we all know that.
Cam, you had something? You look like you were going to say something.
No, they nailed it out of the park with that one.
Okay. So let's move in a little bit of a different direction. Talk to me about your practices. Cam, you go first. Talk to me like, what's a typical Cam practice look like?
In my 7 years, it sort of switched a little bit. I'll go more so from the varsity perspective. We tended to do the basic stretching at the beginning, throw, get loose. I think as I got older and more experienced with my coaching, we transitioned into base running more. After that, just because I felt like that was such a hidden piece of what we could do. I felt like at our high school, we didn't have guys that were going to hit a bunch of home runs. So we had to kind of work with what we had a little bit. And then from there, depending upon the day, whether it be defensive stuff or sort of team offense, is what we did. We tried to intermingle like inter squad scrimmages or team scrimmages, whether it be off the machine or coach pitch, to get live situations as much as possible. The one thing that I have sort of felt as I've gotten more experienced here is the kids don't get game-like experiences enough in being able to stop and teach and work through that in that game-like situation. So to be able to have those sort of coach pitch scrimmages, machine scrimmages, was key for us, and then kind of wrapped up with some pitching and conditioning a little bit at the end, and sort of fixing or tweaking things that we saw throughout practice to kind of go into whether it be a game week or another practice the next day, that sort of situation. That's kind of how we ran it. But in Wisconsin, it's always hard because you could have a plan to be outside on the field, and next thing you know, you're getting 2 inches of snow, and you're changing that real quick because you're in a gym. So, but biggest thing was we were always flexible just because we had to be.
Sam?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've kind of adapted. As of right now, what our typical practices look like is we try to split it up into like 2 segments. And so the first segment is more geared towards like offensive stations. And so before we get into that, we usually will start with like a guided meditation. And so we'll have them work on like the mental side a little bit, do that for 5 or 10 minutes, and then have them jump into like a dynamic warm up just to get their bodies loose, do offensive stations. We'll do things like bunting, cage work off machines, tee works, soft toss, base running. We'll usually tie into that as well too. And then after that, we go into like our second half, which we start with our throwing programs. So each individual position group has a different throwing program that they'll do. And then we'll jump into usually more of like a team element of the aspect of the team. Sorry, I messed that one up a little bit. But so we'll usually jump into like a team aspect of it. We'll usually do like individual defense and then whatever we got to work on, whether that be bunt coverages, first and thirds, whatever the case may be. So, and then usually we'll end with some form of competition. And that's usually like a typical practice for us.
You're up, Jeremy.
Yeah, very similar at the beginning to Sam. We breathe, Catholic school, we pray, dynamic warm up. Catch plays pretty structured. And then you get into one thing I think that we do, maybe it's unique, maybe it's not, is we do like a team catch. So for the last 5 minutes of catch play, we'll do first and thirds with no base runners and work on the second baseman cutting it off, or bang some fungos and work on some relays, right field going home, center field going third, left field going second. Just 5 minutes, high pace, and just getting those reps while everyone's kind of, lubed up and ready to go. There it's indies. One of our coach, position drills, one of our coaches, if we could do indies all day, that's all he would do. He's always campaigning for, hey, can I get a couple more minutes? Can I get a couple more minutes? And that's the energy that we're attacking our practice with. Our coaches coach their butts off. And I'm a big believer in having many coaches because you can do more. So if you get a lot of good people around, you can spread them out and attack more things. So after indies, you probably have your team defense segment, whether it's a rundowns, first and third, PFP, kind of stuff that's on the infield grass, so to speak. We try to hit a lot. It's fun for the kids. We vary the different manners that which we do it. It usually takes about 2 hours, 2.5 hours for our practice. And then every so often we'll do what we call power hour. So we'll have half of our kids get in the weight room, do their lift, and the other half are on the field hitting, running slash, running bunts where you can actually see it on the field, see the ball travel rather than doing it in the cage, right? And then the other guys are getting in our cages, and it's a little more low key, but they're getting their work in and letting it eat a little more on the offensive side.
So yeah, the thing that number one, I'm with all of you. We meditate. First thing we do, we get out and we do everybody just does their own thing. I used to do it where I would line them up and, have them almost like you would do, like if they're stretching in line. But now I just tell them, all right, guys, find a spot, relax, and then I'll kind of walk around and guide them through it a bit. But the other thing, too, that hit home was I think that, and tell me this about you guys, I never used to start my practices with base running. I would go from the meditation right into stretching, right into catch play. But now what I do is I start with base running, okay? And I think two of you said that you started with base running. Why did you do that? Because I know why I did, but why? Why did you change that up? Or have you always done it that way?
I can speak on our end. Part of it is partially on when our assistant coaches can get there too, because they got their own jobs and obviously they've got to make their living for sure. And so we wanted to make sure that we kind of worked a little backwards from it, where if our assistant coaches could be there for the last half hour or the last hour, then that's when we wanted to do our defense, because they'll have their individual responsibilities with position groups, where offensive stations, if we are spread a little bit more thin, it's more manageable than having to do individual defense. So we kind of ran it from that standpoint of we're going to do all of our offensive stuff first because we can manage that with fewer coaches. But we try to make sure that we're on it every single day. Base running is such an undervalued skill, especially at the high school level. It's one of those things that if you really focus on it and really emphasize it, it can absolutely be a game changer.
And I think for me, it was early on in my first couple of years where I realized we could get guys on, but we couldn't move guys around. And we had guys that were hesitant in certain situations, right? Guy on first base hit behind him into right field. They were hesitant on when to go and when not to go. Or line drives with guys at second base sort of freezing when maybe they shouldn't have, because it's we need to read the ball better off the bat. So I think for me, those were ways to get points across to help us score more runs and to keep us in innings more. And I felt like we had their attention early on to be able to do that. That was sort of the why for me and kind of why we did it early on.
Yeah, very, very similar here. We weren't very good for a couple of years here, and we had an upset playoff win. And a coach comes up to us and says, "Hey, the book on you guys was you couldn't hit." And I said, "No, man, we could hit. We just couldn't score." And so the look in the mirror there is why aren't we getting them on, getting them in, getting them over, right? We were getting them on, but not in and over. And that really forced us to look at what we were doing in our practice plan. So throwing it to the front end before catch play, to your point, Cam, you have their attention, right? You're demonstrating like many coaches who are on this or listening now are going to hear it. That's when they do it because it demonstrates that it's important, to you. But also, it's just a great time to just get them going, right? The dynamic warm-ups are great, right? But as the season goes on, maybe they're not as engaged on those as maybe they ought to be. And catch play can fall into that same, monotonous deal there. So if we get their hearts pumping a little bit, it's going to clean some of that stuff up, because it's I got a little sweat, my arm's feeling a little better, on and on and on. It's a game changer in the fact that you're just setting practice up in a pretty engaged tone.
Yeah, and that's why I went to it, for what you said, is to get them going. Let's get them going. And then, I had on a physical therapist that said that you shouldn't really stretch when your muscles are cold. The muscle should be warmed up a little bit before you stretch it. And I said, okay, so we'll get them going, get them worked up a little bit, and then we'll stretch them out. And that's why I went to it. And I think it also has the same effect of what you said, Jeremy, is that if you put it in the beginning of practice, they realize that, yes, the coach thinks this is serious, something that we need to know. So I agree with that.
And I think for us too, right, like game situations or how games played out maybe the day before or a week before, whatever it may be, where it doesn't have to be a long amount of base running before or at the start of practice, but it could be like, hey, man, we really struggled yesterday with being at third base with less than 2 outs and being able to read where that ball is and when to go and when not to go, like those sorts of things where we sort of, as the season went on, would sort of tweak it based on what happened in the games to kind of give us some more reps and more situations.
Yeah. And the cool thing about base running too is there's so many things you can do, right? So you can really stay away from the monotonous part of it, just going around the bases. That's a drill, right? Home to first, first to third, second to home. Now you're talking about, add some defenders in there, the different kinds of tagging up, different kinds of steals. You can incorporate your signs into there. You can keep that fresh so often that it really just keeps their attention. And to your point, it doesn't have to be a half an hour segment. You can bang that out in 10 minutes and make that a really productive 10 minutes and really kick their butts too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree with that 100%. There's so many things you can do. The one thing that always kills me is with, high school players, which I believe they should know by now, is when they get a base hit, they don't understand that they're trying to get 2 out of that base hit. Like so many kids will get a base hit and they're happy with the single. And so we have to drill them and drill them and drill them so that they take a big turn. And then, when you see that, you can't get the second, break down and come back. And I mean, I'll do that drill until their feet bleed because they don't get it. So,
yeah.
Okay, so let's move off of that a little bit. Let's go to a little bit how we all met, coaching education. So what do you guys have as you go to, like your best resources for learning? What is it, books, online platforms, podcasts, whatever?
For me, it's podcasts. And I think...
Well, wait a minute, Cam. Wait a minute. It's not podcasts. It's Clearing the Bases podcast.
Yes.
No,
yes.
I'm sorry.
The Clearing the Bases podcast, number one. I just think for me, like with podcasts, you get a chance to learn from a variety of different people from maybe you would never get a chance to hear from. I think it allows us to get into sort of how other coaches do things. So podcasts would be for me, number one. I have about a 25-minute drive to work, and so it was a simple way to learn while riding in the car. My kids hated it. My girls hated when certain podcasts would come on. But as I get older too, I get more into reading now than probably what I ever did. So, and it could be books on coaches, it could be leadership, it could be any of the sports. Those are sort of my go-tos.
Sam?
Yeah, I will say, like, I try to keep as much variety as possible. So I think the more places you can get information, the better. And so, like Cam said, I think, podcasts, specifically Clearing the Bases podcast. But, podcasts, books are always good go-tos. There's so many, like, ABCA videos out there and videos on YouTube. I will say, like, as far as, like, a go-to goes, I'm fully well aware that I come from a background where I have coached under 2 longtime head coaches at the high school level, and I would be an absolute idiot to not use those sources. So, if I need something, I know I'm more than able to call up Coach Furneaux from Layton or Coach Sato from Bingham and get, their perspective on things or their advice. And, they're such great people and such great coaches. And I think it kind of ties back into, if you're able to build those relationships with people, like, use them. Like, that's what we're here for. We're here to help each other out. So,
yeah. JT.
Yeah, I remember listening to somebody one time, and it was one of these venerable, awesome coaches, at the ABCA, and they were like, you're really going to grow the most when you kind of move away from, consuming baseball 24/7 and start getting into leadership or philosophy or things like that. And I remember when I was in my mid-20s, I was like, no, I love baseball. And I was reading every book on Terry Francona and Tony La Russa and, all of Dorfman stuff and all of the Revisa stuff and on, Garrido, on and on and on, right? My life was consumed by that. But son of a gun, if the last few years I haven't sort of, I'm not going to say turn that off. Like there's definitely a window in my year where it's like all ABCA clinics and stuff like that. But the podcast on like Rick Rubin, he talks a lot about creativity and making yourself available to the answer when it's time to be there. So definitely podcast in that space, the Rich Roll podcast, and even like all of Ryan Holiday's stuff on Stoic philosophy. Just what great ways, because the lessons that you can bring to your team, you screenshot that, you throw that thing out there. And I don't know, maybe they're rolling their eyes or not, but the idea that stuff is building you up a little bit and challenging you in a way that's removed from the game. The last year or three, I've really found a lot of personal value in I guess, building myself up in that sense, knowing that the baseball stuff can and will be there when it needs to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way with everybody mentioned it. Podcasts, I listen to a million podcasts. And also I love the fact that the ABCA puts all of their clinic videos. I love that. I go back and I look at them. Some of them I'll go over time and time and time again. So, yeah, I mean, there are just so many sources out there that people can utilize. And again, I say it all the time. I just don't understand why more coaches, youth coaches especially, travel ball coaches, there's so many sources out there that you can learn from, because I don't think that enough people educate themselves, and there's no excuse for it now. Like when I was in my 20s or I was in my 30s, you had a little bit of an excuse. If you wanted to, you either had to go and buy a book, or you had to go to the library and get a book, or you had to know somebody that could teach you. Well, nowadays, there's no excuse for not learning something to be able to teach your players.
To me, I think that was the one good, like, if there was one good thing that came out of COVID, it was the fact that coaches were able to do a lot of Zooms, right? And you were able to hear from a lot of different people on so many different parts of the game. You know what I mean? So you were like, that was big for me. It's just being able to hear different parts of the game. And not even just the game on the field, but the mental side of it with all of that too. So,
yeah, I mean, my mental performance coach, I met him through the ABCA. He lives in Hawaii, and he taught me over a year's time, once a week. We met for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, once a week. And to your point, that all came about because of the use of Zoom meetings, and I think it became more prevalent during COVID. That's, yeah. Okay, guys, let's see. Ooh, this is another good one. How about communicating your expectations and your roles with parents? Ooh.
I can start on that one. There's a misconception in our program that, I don't talk to parents. And that's not necessarily true. The idea when it comes to the roles and expectations with our parents is, I remember my Little League coach, Aaron Brumley, he called and said, I don't talk to Jeremy. Jeremy's the one who is on the team. Jeremy's the one who's playing, and we're going to talk to Jeremy. That's made a lot of sense to me when I was 12 years old, and I guess my parents too, because they didn't, necessarily get in the way. So the idea that in our program, the players are driving the communication, and not to be standoffish, not to be trying to run away from confrontation, but the life lessons that are in the conversations that we have with our players, right? I don't see why any parent would not want their kids to be made available to that, what is sometimes a very uncomfortable conversation. Hey, I'm not going to be able to give you what you want. Or, hey, this is what happened. Or, hey, you're bringing something to my attention that maybe we didn't even know, So we really are player driven in our parent communication, I guess you would say. But it's more so for the fact that to get our young people to speak up for themselves, to have a conversation that may be a little difficult. And, if and when a parent needs to be involved, the last 6 months, we've been a little more, we've taken some initiative with some parent conversations and bringing the player to the table too. And those have been awesome, to get there. Because then the parents see, oh, wow, these people really care about my son. It's probably very reassuring for them. So there's some evolution on our part there. But 90+% of what we're doing is through the player, because that's just a wonderful life lesson for those kids to take on, for sure.
Yeah, I love what you had to say there about this idea of players driving the conversation. As coaches, I would say a good majority of us are probably in this profession to help young men or young, women grow up to, be contributing members of society. And one of the most important skills you can learn is communication. And if we are doing all the communication with the parents, that is doing the kids a disservice. And if the whole purpose of us coaching is to help the kids, that needs to be the priority. So like you said, Jeremy, we try to have a player-driven source of communication. We are not opposed to talking with parents, but there are some do's and don'ts. And so I always, when we have our team put together this spring, we have a parent meeting and let the parents know, if you want to talk to us about the well-being of your kid, I would hope that you would want to come and talk to us. We're in this for the same reason. We want to help your kid. But if that conversation starts gearing towards things like playing time, roles, that we're not going to talk about. And I'm not going to be an a-hole about it, but just, hey, that's not what we talk about here. If you want to talk about the well-being of your kid, please let me know, because I want to help them. But if it starts gearing in towards anything else, that's not really what we're here for. Your kid wants to have that conversation. We are more than happy to have that conversation. But there does have to be that clear line that's drawn. And sometimes you have to keep redrawing it. But that's a part of it, because it kind of ties back into this idea that we are doing this for the kids. And granted, sometimes the kids go home and they say something that maybe they misunderstood or maybe wasn't clarified the best, right? And you have to re-clarify those conversations. But again, it's the kids then practicing communication. It's better that they have that experience now than when they have a job and they mess up and they tell somebody what their boss said when they really didn't, or vice versa, or whatever the case is. And now they're really in trouble because it's a job that you need to pay bills. And so I think I love what you had to say about that idea of just player-driven communication. Let them figure that out now when the stakes are pretty low.
Biggest thing that I learned is that 24-hour rule is so key, because listen, as a dad, right? I get it, right? Watching my kids play or swim or do their sports, the energy after that event is hyped, right? But the best conversations that I can have as a coach are when emotions are sort of toned down and we can speak sort of on what the facts are. So I think that was always a big one for me. I think sort of listening to you guys too, the player-driven piece sort of reminded me I have to do a good job as a coach of building relationships with the kids off the field, so that way they are comfortable coming and having those conversations. Because if I don't have a relationship with them outside of the field, man, those conversations are sometimes hard. They're sometimes awkward. You don't know how a kid works sometimes, and that can make the conversation tricky. I know, for me, it was always important to be at all of our open gyms, to be at sporting events where I could see the kids, to have those conversations. So that way, when those difficult conversations and the communication needed to happen, there was that relationship and trust sort of built up. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but it's we can't have 12 guys on the field. We're going to do the best that we can, but also understanding too that at the varsity level of high school, I can't go 0-24 every year, right? I can't get all of the kids the opportunities they want, because if I'm going 0-24, they're not going to keep me around very long. So it's hard. I get it, but we tried to make it very player driven like you guys do. But also understanding that there's points and times where, the parents want to have conversations. And I think that's an important piece too.
Yeah. I guess we'll say my policy is to be brutally honest. It's that simple. Have your facts and be brutally honest.
And I think for me, like, man, taking this year off, like in listening to you guys talk and learn and grow from that communication piece, like that's going to be my biggest takeaway from my year away is just sort of how do I now want to turn and tweak that so that way, the kids and the parents understand that we do have their best interests at heart, and understand too that, like I said, we can't have 14 guys on the field, right? We're sort of limited by the rules of baseball and substitutions and how we can use guys and how we can't. And so, I think just learning that and growing is going to be big, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, my first year as head coach, took over for a wonderful longtime coach, Alan Rossi. They won a ton of section championships here. Just an unbelievable record of success. And we went 5-19 my first year. And I'm eager, I'm gung-ho, and I'm like, I'll talk to all the parents, But when you're 5-19, a lot of people want to talk to you, and they are not in the best mood. And as I was going through that, and hearing you all talk, it's reminded me just the idea that you're not going to be able to please everyone. And hopefully you're demonstrating a body of work that is in good faith by their sons, regardless of, they got 84 at-bats at the end of the year or 8, that they know, hey, this coach has my son's best interest in mind. But you're just not going to please everyone. I think as a leader, you have to be steadfast and, have thick enough skin to realize that at a certain point, not everyone's going to be able to be made to be happy. And your job is to be able to, sleep the slumber of the just at night and know, hey, I'm doing right by the kid. And this is the best, most informed decision we can make. And that's just all there is to it. I'm sorry if there's, non-closure here on the parental part. I promise you it's not because we're trying to, get a job over on your kid.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, there's a couple of more things I want to get to. So let's talk a little bit, because this is a youth baseball podcast. Let's talk about the little guys. So what is your belief that, or let me put it to you this way, how would you foster a love for the game with young players? Because I think that's really important.
The more you play it, the more you love it. I think that's what it was for me, and I think the old ways of practice where you had one kid hitting and the other 11 out in the field, and you can't do it that way anymore. And I think good programs that I've seen and watched is you've got maybe 3 or 4 coaches and you split it up into smaller groups to keep guys active. And I think at the high school level, you find ways to get your players involved with the youth kids. You find a way to get the youth kids involved with the high school, whether it be youth nights and being out on the field or coming to practices and things like that. I think fosters a love for the game for the little guys to want to have aspirations to play on that big field. I think that's what they all want. You just have to find a way as a coach to help foster that relationship with the youth and the little league in your areas.
I think a huge part of maybe baseball, not the golden batter rule or whatever Manfred's throwing around out there right now, but the rebranding part of baseball of this game of failure, right? Our young people really struggle with failure. So if you're going into a game where you say, hey, by the way, you're going to fail, right? That's a heavy word to a young person right now. 7 out of 10 times and you'll be good. Gee, that doesn't feel very good. So I think as coaches and baseball people, trying to figure out a way to recalibrate that message might go a long way, so they can find the wins in a productive out, quality at bat, or on and on and on, that the ups and downs that baseball provides would go a long way. And to adding on to Cam's point, letting players be versatile with their positions early on, pigeonholing kids in as a shortstop, especially in this world where a lot of people think they're the shortstop or they're the ace, or they're being hailed as such. As a coach, it costs you nothing to let a kid go there for 5 minutes during a drill. Right. So meeting them where they're at, so it's fun. They're feeling like they're getting a good shot at it. Right. Butch Chapin always says, you got to give them hope. You got to make them feel like they're a part of something special. So if you're giving them that costs you 5 minutes to make their experience a little better, that's a no-brainer, right, on the return on investment. So the versatility part and letting them all get a fair shake at it, especially when you're talking about the little guys, you just don't know. How many of us were, the big studs when we're 10, 11, 12 years old? I know I wasn't, right, but I loved the game. But if people would have pushed me out by not fostering that love, we wouldn't be talking right now. So you got to see through the kids that really love the game and foster that out and let that grow. Let them surprise you, right? That's where the best moments happen.
Yeah, I think it's a loaded question too. I think there's a lot of elements there that you could probably dive into. I think there was a couple of things that stood out. JT talking about this idea of not pigeonholing your kid to a certain position. There are so many changes that happen at the high school level, where we're talking about like physical changes, mental changes. Like you may think your kid is a shortstop when they're 8, but it's like by the time they reach, 13, 14, like if they're 6'3", 200 pounds, yeah, they're not a shortstop, right? Unless they move like Derek Jeter. Like that's just, right? So like there's just so many changes that happen. So I think, again, that versatility piece is huge. Letting the kids have fun, right? I also think there is an element of there is a lot of pressure that is put on kids to succeed at a very young age. Like we have these like national 8U, 9U tournaments. Like, dude, I could barely tie my shoes at 8 years old. Like you're trying to like get them throwing, 67. Like what is this about, right? This is a kid's game. So I think trying to find ways to minimize pressure. Pressure is going to happen, and I think it's important for growth, but putting it into perspective, I think, is huge. And I like what Cam said about being involved in the community. If there is ever a chance that you can have your kid be involved with something to do with our older boys at the high school level, like you should absolutely do it. And it's funny, we went to a couple elementary schools this past winter and just kind of like read to kids and helped them out. And it's so funny because the handful of kids that I have, like our high school kids, where I go, I hope that he doesn't say something to this elementary kid that like is going to get me fired, right? And I look and they're like the best ones, right? They're like picking them up and running around with them. And it's just like our older boys are like, you'd be surprised how good they are with the little ones. And so I think the more opportunities you have, like if you have a young kid, get them involved with any type of high school camp, high school anything. Just get them around the game. I think that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked about it on a couple of shows ago where I had a 2-day clinic, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, and I had my varsity players helping us work through the drills and stuff with the boys. And the look on the younger guys, the 7th graders and the 8th graders, looking up at the varsity players, it's priceless because you could see that. Almost you could almost hear them saying, boy, I can't wait till I get to play high school baseball, So I think to what Cam said about the community, yes, I believe that's really, really important. So, all right. So let's just wrap this up with how we all met. Okay. So we all met at Sheets coaching clinic. Let's go down the list here and you guys tell me, what was your biggest takeaway from the 10 weeks that we spent together?
Well, good question.
JT's mentioned it a couple times, where this idea that like we're all kind of going through the same stuff, and it's interesting, and this is layered for sure. But like as a coach, this is an incredible job. Absolutely love it. I love being around the kids. I love the people. I wouldn't do anything else. Like this is truly what I believe. What I was put on earth to do is to help people through the game of baseball. That being said, at times being a head coach can kind of be lonely. And I say that, but like I have great assistant coaches. I have great people that I can talk to. But just having those support groups is so huge being able to just call up Cam, Jimmy, Jeremy, whoever, and just be, hey, this is what I'm going through. Like, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking? What do you like? It carries so much weight because then once you start talking, it's like, oh, he knows the exact same thing that I'm going through. Like he's dealt with the exact same thing. And so I think just opening up those relationships, understanding that we are not alone, that we have a bunch of people that want to help, that are willing to help. And it's kind of like this brotherhood, like that you just start loving each other. And it is something that is really hard to come by. And I say that with like the best assistant coaches in the world. I love them to death. They're incredible. I know I could talk to them at any point, at any time. But just always having those extra opportunities, those extra groups to talk to, like it carries so much weight. And so I thought Sheets did an incredible job of putting this together where guys can rely on one another and be there to support each other.
I think for me, it was a lot of like what Sammy said there was what it was for me, right? Like I crave or want to always have that group that you can go to when it comes to baseball stuff. And sometimes too, it's non-baseball stuff to talk about, and like you said, it can be lonely as the head coach, right? Because you're the one that carries that burden when you get home, that thinks about it when you go to bed, that thinks about it when you get up and you're in a classroom all day teaching, going, how am I going to deal with this situation? To be able to have a group of guys that you can throw in a group chat or say, hey, you got 10 minutes, I'm on my way home, can I run this idea by you? That part was really, really big for me. And my biggest thing is Sheets hasn't done anything bad. Whenever he's put his name to stuff, like it's been successful. And so I think when he put this together, it was a no-brainer for me because I knew I was going to learn a lot about the game, a lot about myself, and meet a group of guys that were like-minded like me.
Yeah, you mentioned organization there or something there right around that. And that's definitely my biggest takeaway. Or so you were talking about loneliness, right? And I think as a coach, the head coach, you have, certain elements of loneliness. And the biggest takeaway for me was with my program, right? You're in charge of the whole deal. And that the big takeaway there was I need to be more organized, right? And when things are lonely, you're probably not sharing how you want things to go as well as you want it to be to your assistants. In turn, your players are getting some miscommunication. So putting all the stuff down on paper that we did was so great because it really forced us to be clear and concise. And now I have something that I can better deliver to the staff and in turn the players. And the other thing of organization was thoughts, right? Some of the exercises we did on, emotional intelligence. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I get pretty, ornery out at the ball field. And, it's not presenting myself in the best possible way. So going through that experience while we were doing some of our fall stuff really challenged me to be like, is this a big deal right now? No. Right? Can you back down a little bit? Yes. And it was very imperfectly executed, as I'm sure you can all relate to, as men and people going through the world. But the organization of my thoughts to better deliver myself to people was just something that was very much needed for me at this juncture in my life / career. It was very powerful. And to hear other people going through, similar stages or that have sort of conquered those demons, so to speak, in the group was like, okay, cool. There is another, there's a pot of gold here at the end of this rainbow.
I think the biggest thing for me too, and I don't know how you guys felt, but I tend to stay inward with myself. So when some of the homework that we had was, hey, you've got to call 2 guys this week and be on the phone with 2 guys that you've never met, other than through the videos in the group stuff on Sunday. Like that was big for me, to put myself out there and to say, hey, I'm going to call you Wednesday and to have those conversations, sometimes cold conversations, was big for me personally to be able to say, hey, like, I'm good enough to have those conversations and do that in those sort of scenarios.
Well, I got to say that I really can't add to what you guys just said, because that's everything that I got out of it. The organization part, the networking part, the relationships. All of you guys I had phone conversations with. I never met you before in my life, and I think every one of us talked for at least an hour. Now, maybe that's because I got a big mouth. I don't know, but I felt like, meeting you guys and the other guys in the group, that these are relationships that now are going to be lifelong. And, anytime any of you guys have a question, by all means, call me. And I'm sure that there'll be times where I'll rattle you and say, hey, I did something dumb again. Help me out here. So, all right, guys, let me tell you, first of all, I can't thank you guys enough for coming on tonight, because I think this is going to be a great show. And number two, I am so happy to have you guys in my life. It was just such a pleasure meeting you guys.
Same here. It was a pleasure meeting you guys as well. This was fun.
All right, guys. So let's stay in touch. And I don't know. Well, everybody will be in Washington, right?
Yep.
I will not be.
You won't be. Well, I'll come and get you in Wisconsin. Huh?
That works for me. I think this will be a year that I take off and then kind of get back into it, because I want to say, where is it next year? Chicago or Nashville again?
No, I think it's in Columbus next year in Ohio. I think. So, yeah. So, for me, that's two easy ones to get to there, and Washington, D.C. is, closer than normal. But Sam, you'll be in Washington, right?
We'll see. I'm going to try to make it work with our winter schedule. But we'll see.
I'll give the boys a couple of days off. Come on.
Our first 2 days. So that's the hard part.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We'll try to make it work.
Yeah. All right, guys. So I look forward to seeing you. Maybe we'll get together, have a drink, have some dinner, whatever. And again, I can't thank you enough. This was great, guys.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate you guys.
I told you were going to learn a lot from this episode. And if your mind wasn't flooded with all of the information from Jeremy, Sam, and Cam, I mean, there was just so much stuff there. We got into leadership. We got into practice planning. We got into meditation. We were talking about relationships. Just so much. The first thing I got to do is I got to thank Sheets. Because if he doesn't come up with this Diamond Coaches Development Group, then I don't get to meet these guys, nor do I get to become a better coach because of what he taught us during this 10-week course. And there's a bunch of guys coming up in the next 2 episodes also. So we're going to get a lot of perspective from a lot of coaches from all over the country. I mean, here we had California, we had Utah, we had Wisconsin, all over the place. I mean, and we got guys from Texas and Tennessee and Indiana and just all over the country. We even got a New Yorker coming on, which is really cool. So, listen, I always say that as coaches, we need to better educate ourselves so that we can better educate our players. It's going to help everybody in the long run, and I really hope everybody enjoyed this episode. So, if you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Visit the website at thectbshow.net. Leave us a review, even sign up to be a guest. Your feedback helps us bring you the best content and reach more people in the baseball community just like you. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, reach out to us on social media. X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and please drop us an email, clearingthebases@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and I can't wait to see you back here for the next episode. Until then, coaches and players, keep practicing, stay positive, and remember, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.